Okay, and welcome to hashtag isolation art making day 1. Today I will be doing a quick challenge. It is going to be a draw along, and this is intended for people who are, middle school age and upwards. If you are younger, that doesn't mean you can't participate. It just means you may find the drawing a little more difficult, but feel free to do your best to follow along. Today I am just working with a pencil. Any kind of pencil will do. And I am working on just some white sketch paper in a sketchbook, but you can use whatever you have available to you. Loose leaf will work if it's all you got. Today's subject is going to be a bar of soap. We've been talking a lot about soap, and I know in my middle school classes we've started recently, I've started covering the idea of form, and these lessons aren't really intended to be like a formal lesson plan or anything. These are just draw-alongs to enjoy, and maybe just give you something to do if you have about 20 minutes, I would say half an hour. So today again, I said we are going to do the bar soap with bubbles, and so we're going to get started today with the shape of that bubble, and so talking about the idea of shape and form. So to make our drawing more dynamic, we're going to start off with the soap, the bar of soap. I know lately we've been talking a lot about liquid soaps being a little bit more superior, obviously, but the bar soap is still a great soap and comes in almost unlimited scents and colors. So what I'm doing is when I am drawing this, I'm just going to make sure that my angles of my soap are the same. So you can do that just by checking with your pencil. You can roll it, and we'll check this end with this end. It's pretty good. And from there, I'm going to come straight down. Now, if I put these on an angle, which is a really common problem for people who are starting to learn to draw three-dimensional objects, a lot of times people will start to slant these. Now you want to make sure that this part of your soap bar is definitely completely vertical. It's straight up and down, and they're all going to be the same. Now this one, it would have one back here, but we're not doing a transparent bar today, so you won't be able to see that. Now when I come in to draw the bottoms of this, I'm going to make sure that they are in line, that they're parallel with the lines above them. So I'm just going to lightly sketch this, and you'll notice that when I'm drawing, I'm making a lot of extra lines. So if people are not used to drawing or sketching, this is definitely something that you may wish to erase every single time you make that extra line that is not the line you intended. Like I've got this line out here. But really, when you're first getting started, it's much faster to get it drawn out than to draw and erase and redraw and erase and redraw and erase. So we'll just get the shape in here. And what I'm doing is I'm rounding my corners just to make that bar soap look, I guess, more organic, more like an actual bar. Now, if you want to get really fancy, you could dip down a bit. You could make your bar of soap look more used just by inverting these lines a bit. I'm just going to leave my bar of soap nice and fresh, because really, what is better than a box of soap fresh out, or a bar of soap fresh out of the box? So now that I have my soap shape, I'm going to start thinking about the bubbles, and that's actually going to be the subject of my next isolation art making video as well. I'm going to do some pencil crayon stuff tomorrow, so if you can locate some pencil crayons, that would be super awesome. But for today, we're just going to work with our pencil. So my bubbles, I'm going to start with the mass, like how I want these bubbles to sit on this bar. And I'm using a picture that I found online for reference, and I looked up a few pictures of bubbles. I suggest that you do the same. Your drawing should not and does not need to be exactly the same as mine. So if you're finding your bar of soap kind of like, maybe it looks too flat, maybe it's too long, maybe you want to do it shorter, now would be the time to adjust before you get that mass of bubbles done. And feel free, as you watch these videos, to pause before you go on to the next step. So if you're still adjusting this, just pause the video for a second. But I'm going to go ahead. So my mass of bubbles, we always work when I'm in the classroom or when I'm teaching drawing. I really try to remind people of a really great saying that I heard when I first started teaching, and that was, first the dog, then the fleas. So you don't start by drawing, like if you want to draw a dog, you're not going to start by drawing the fleas that are on the dog. You're going to try to get that dog shape on there first. So work with your big details to your small details. So right now what I'm thinking about is just that shape of the bar of soap and where those bubbles, how they're sitting on it, how they're flowing off of it. So that's why you're seeing like this. This is sort of making a pool of bubbles on the surface. So I have my big shape, and again, like you could add shapes. You could totally make this entirely different in form. It is entirely up to you how you make your bubbles. So from there, we're going to think that, I'm going to just sketch up here for a second, that the soap bubbles are going to vary in shape depending how you're looking at them. So oftentimes we're going to see an arc shape like this, and then sometimes we're going to see some overlapping, right, like this. And we might see the bottom of the bubble, which will be an arc in the opposite direction and slightly less arced, right? So we're just going to start thinking about the biggest bubbles first. Again, first the dog, then the fleece, and then we'll work our small bubbles in around it. So let's see here. I'm going to put a big bubble over here, and I'm also going to erase this this soap bar line for now. I'm going to add a big arc here and some over here, and we're keeping those arcs in a similar direction for now. Now we can actually change these so that they arc towards the side as we go over there. And we can change them a bit over here as well. I'm just figuring out some soap bubbles. Maybe I can see this whole bubble here. Think about some down here. So you just kind of decide where you're going to put your bubbles. And we're not going to try, again, it's that idea of like, you don't need to draw every single little bubble. And if you really want to like do this in an interesting way, what you could do is you could actually lather up some soap and have a look at it, see how those bubbles are formed. Now I think it would take a lot to get a bar of soap to have these piles of lathers. This looks more like maybe dish soap or something. But I wanted it to look extra sudsy. So I'm just working sort of around here. These bubbles are behind this bubble, so we are layering them. Again, maybe have some larger ones in front here. And start thinking about this mass here on the side. And you guys can just let me know however you would like to. I think comments are blocked because my YouTube channel is set for younger people to keep it nice and safe. But If you know me and want to, you can either go to my website and message me. It's www.smallcoffee.ca. There is a contact me page there, so feel free to go on there and let me know if you would rather do an entire draw through, or if you would rather that, like, for details like this, what I often do when I'm teaching is I will actually just do a time lapse of all of this detail, just to make the videos a bit shorter. But if you're drawing along with me, it doesn't really matter. So I'm just, again, adding a variety of sizes, and it's important to think of your whole drawing at once. We call that the gestalt. So you're thinking about working all of the pieces together instead of just isolating individual parts. You're thinking, okay, well, how is this all going to look together? So that's why I'm kind of working all over with these bubbles right now. Now these suds here that have fallen off, they're going to be pretty much mostly smaller bubbles. These are the big ones up here. So what I'm sketching in is the major bubbles. These are the ones that you can actually see the individual ones. And maybe I'll add just a couple over here. So I'm spreading them out, and they're getting smaller as they come down this way. And they're just going to be a couple of individual bubbles there. We'll go a little bit smaller. All right. It looks like I have the majority of what I want as far as bubbles set in. So now what I'm going to think about is the smaller detail, and some of that I'm just going to do with shading. So this would be the time where I start to clean up if there's anything I want to adjust, and I'm going to lighten up the edge of this bubble line. So with that, I'm also going to start considering what tone I'm going to do the soap, so how dark it's actually going to get. And the darkest part of this is going to actually be the shadow right here, kind of underneath these bubbles, and this part right here. So the part where the least light is hitting it is going to be the darkest. And this bar of soap that I'm using as a reference is actually, it's not a white bar of soap, it is a colored bar of soap. So I'll just start in with my shading. Now you may find that your shading may not go as well as you would like. That just comes with practice. Also, my paper has a little bit of a tooth, which means that the fibers are picking up my pencil, and this is a pencil that is meant for drawing, and so it's leaving quite a bit of graphite on the paper here. If you're using a really smooth paper, you may find that it's hard to get a tone like this with your regular pencil. It may be leaving kind of scratchy lines. It may be really light. Even all HBs, I've learned over time, like the variety of the graphite tone that you'll get just from different brands is pretty extraordinary. So if you're not having much luck with your pencil, you may try a different one. So just shading the soap. It's going to be a little bit lighter here, but not too bright. And I'm leaving the white for my soap bubbles here. Same thing, I'm going to round the corner, and I'm trying to just add this value, add this shading in. We refer to it as tone. I'm adding it in the same direction. Now, some people prefer to draw kind of all over the place. I like, if I know that I'm doing a flat surface, to either choose one of the planes. So I'd either be shading this way or I'd be shading up and down, just in case I do have some line work that I have to hide after. So something that I really try to encourage when I'm teaching drawing, especially just pencil techniques like this, if you're just starting out, to be patient and to add your layers really lightly. Don't go too dark too fast, because it's much easier to darken it up than it is to erase it and have to start over. So now I'm just going to get this part that's not picking up quite as much because it got pressed down with my eraser. Just going to touch up the shading. Now whatever I rub my hand on that, I'm going to smudge it. So there's lots of tricks for dealing with that. If you find that you are a smudger and you don't like that it affects your drawing, you can always just take another scrap piece of paper and put it under your hand, just like that. So I'll just finish up this soap bar. And again, I'm going along the plane. I'm shading along the direction of that plane, and I'm pressing really lightly with my pencil. And you'll notice in order to do that, I'm actually not bearing down on it, drawing like I normally would. I'm using the side of my pencil lead to just gently allow the paper to pick up some of that graphite. All right, so just add just the tiniest bit of definition around these bubbles here. And maybe a little bit more along this edge. That's looking pretty good. Now, there's going to be some of that bar of soap showing through these bubbles. I'm just going to shade up to the bubbles, around the bubbles, just along this edge. Again, trying to remember to shade in the direction that the bar is going in. So that it lines up with my other shading. Now this one, as it rounds the corner, we know that this side of the soap bar is a bit darker. All right, so now we'll start shading in where the bubbles are a bit darker on that bar of soap. Just a few pieces here and there. Again, trying to remember where exactly, what the plane, the surface of that bar is. Now if you're doing your own bubbles, just make sure you're not shading right through them. We are going to see bits and pieces of that here in a second, but now if you are fussy about these lines, I have lots of students that feel the desperate need to smudge those all in. It's really not necessary. Pencil drawing is very beautiful, and sometimes part of that beauty is actually being able to see the artist's hand, so the evidence that you have drawn it. So it's not necessary to smudge this all in. Otherwise you'll have bubbles that are the texture of smooth cream cheese, and that's not really what we're necessarily going for. So the last thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to, just as far as the straight shading that I was just doing, I'm just going to hint at, in each of these, where that edge of the soap is. Now I don't want to draw a continuous line because then I'll lose that translucent soapy effect. I'll do the same thing over here a bit. So now my last, just clean up that edge, my last soapy effect is to just go in and add some of these suds. And so I'm just going to work in some little circles, and I'm going to lightly shade between them. You can do bigger ones, little ones. Just remember that you want those big bubbles to still, to not have bubbles right in front of them. You're going to go along the bottom of them with those. So I'm leaving this bubble here, and this would be the bottom of it. So I'm allowing some of these suds, these little tiny suds, to just settle along the bottoms of the big bubbles. Now, again, as I said, not necessary to draw every single little tiny individual cell of those suds. So with some of these sections, I'm just going to leave them be and leave them white. Now, if you really want to get fancy, you can shade the same reflection on each of these suds. Same shape. Right here I'm doing like a triangular shape, like there's something behind me that I would say from the picture that this is probably one of the lights or something in the background that's casting a bit of a shadow on those bubbles, or a reflection, I should say. So I'm just adding that same reflection. That gives you the idea that each of these bubbles is in the same place. Because if you start putting different shapes on each of these, different colors on each of these, it's not going to make any sense. All right. Oh, a few more suds. We're almost done. So I hope that you've enjoyed this. Some of my students find drawing very soothing, but don't necessarily expect that it will be for you. I would love to think that drawing is universally calming and meditative, but for some people it's incredibly frustrating. So allow yourself to be not okay with your drawing. If you don't love how it turns out, that's fine. This is us learning. This is evidence of us just taking the time to look closely and to think about our drawing, but not to be frustrated by the limits of our abilities, because we are all on a different scale of our ability to draw, right? So with this stuff down here, I might just shade just the tiniest bit to indicate that there are areas of this that are darker. But really, I'm going to leave a lot of this just suggested. The suggestion of bubbles. So be patient with yourself. We're in some unusual circumstances right now, so don't allow your drawing to add more frustration to that. Just give yourself the time and space to try to learn something new. Maybe you're not really an avid drawer, but you just want to try something different for a few minutes. So I'm pretty happy with these suds. I mean, I could fiddle with this for hours and hours, I'm sure, but I'm not going to. I'm going to limit this experience today. So what I'm going to add, just to give my bar of soap a little bit of a space to exist, I'm going to give it a little bit of a shadow here. And I'm going to go darker, obviously, than my previous stuff. And that's why, again, so important in your drawing not to go too dark too early, because then you won't be able to go darker later. It's much easier to go over your drawing darker than it is to erase it and try again. You just do the same thing along this side. Remember that your shadow is going to reflect the same angle as your object. And then what I might do is just bring that shadow so that it has a bit of a blurred edge, and so by adding a little bit of tone to it, I can do that. So thank you so much for tuning into my channel and taking the time out to do a little bit of drawing. I mean, drawing is something that you can work at your whole life and always learn something about it. So just adding a little bit of detail in here. And maybe a little bit of shadow just around where my bubbles hit in the bar of soap and giving it a bit of a bumpy edge. I'm pretty happy with that. I think that turned out all right. So if you are happy with your drawing, I suggest always putting a little bit of information on your drawing. So for example, this one I know I did on March 18th, 2020. And that way when you look at it later, you'll be able to remember when you're working on it. So today was a Sudsy Bar of Soap. Again, thanks for tuning in. And if you're looking for other drawing ideas, if you just go on my website, I believe it's under the middle school section. There's actually a list that I used to use for high school as well. And it has 100 ideas of just things to draw in your sketchbook, and they're all very open-ended. So I think the handout is called Sketchbook Ideas, and yeah, you'll find lots on there. So I hope you're having a wonderful time with your isolation art making, and that you are being kind and patient with yourself and everyone around you. I hope everyone has a wonderful day. Take care.